This is Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television. My name is Joshua Ishal. Welcome you to another fresh episode of the program Back to Farm. Back to Farm is a program that tells you all you need to know so we can actually return back to farms, talking about trying to create employment to teeming unemployed Nigerian youth, and also to tell us that this has been our first love before the oil boom. And today on Back to Farm, we want to look at starting up a maize farm with a very low capital. Talking about you out there who wants to go into a maize farming, we just want to tell you how you can actually start up your maize farm using some few hundreds of thousands so that you can actually have a farm like you can see behind me. So just follow us on this interesting episode as we're going to be giving you a holistic breakdown on how that is actually achievable and possible. Stay tuned. In recent years, farming in Nigeria has taken a substantial and reasonable turn in a better direction, creating jobs and opportunities for entrepreneurs who dare to go into the farming business. There is no end to the prospect of creating more wealth through farming in coming years. Maize farming is one of the crop farming that is very suitable for such. It is as old as man itself and has done commercially well in Nigeria for decades now. There is no end to the prospect of creating more wealth through farming in the coming years. Maize is a cereal crop and is one of the most widely distributed food crops in the world. Maize, which is also known as corn, is a crop that produces grains which can be used as food for human beings and livestock. Maize can be used for the things aside being used for food. Large quantity of maize derivative are being used for industrial production of pharmaceuticals, paper, textiles, paints, biofuels, and many more. On a budget, aside from being a commercially viable crop, setting up your maize farming business can be daunting. This can easily be achieved in the following steps. Number 1 step: get a suitable farmland. Maize is best grown in a rich loamy or sandy loamy soils. Avoid waterlogged areas. Ensure trees and vegetations do not overshadow the maize plant. It makes sense to take a lease on the farming equipment requirement for maize farming for a period. Farmlands are vast and available in Nigeria at a low cost. You can rent a land on a yearly basis for 4,000 naira per hectare in some northern states of Nigeria. After getting a suitable land, what you need to do next is pick the maize variety. The improved maize varieties have the best genetic potential for maximum yield per hectare. High-yielding varieties with good farming practices and management will translate the maize farms produce to high profitability and returns on investment. It is important to get the maize seed that is accepted in the market. How to fast they grow, how resistant they are to pests and diseases, and can survive through based on their consumption of water or not. You can get a good high-yield hybrid maize seed with resistant that ranges from 2,000 naira to 4,000 naira. After picking the maize variety, it's time for planting. The best time to plant maize seed is to do it right after rainy season has started, about 2 or 3 times after the first rain. Planting during this period will aid better growth and maturity for your maize crop because some maize plants need a lot of water during their growth process. Some consume as much as 450 to 600 ml of water. For market and demand reasons, it is better to start your maize farm within early planting season. The optimum planting date is between 15th March and 15th May. After time of planting, what you need to do is weeding, disease control, and fertilizer. It is important to understand that the fertility of a soil determines the need for fertilizer or not. There are different types of fertilizers you could purchase, but irrespective of how fertile the soil is, if you want higher yields, you can apply fertilizer to the farmland. Good fertilizer costs around 6,000 naira to 10,000 naira. It is important to protect your maize crop from weed, pests, and disease like armyworms, downy mildew, striggers, grasshoppers, and several others. Inasmuch as your resources are limited and you're working in a budget, the key to profitability in maize is to maximize your yield. This can be achieved with these few steps. Number 1 step, ensuring plant density and population. In general, 1 hectare of farmland can be used for growing 60,000 stacks of a maize plant. From each of them, you can cultivate 1 to 2 crops. Per hectare of land, it is possible to harvest 80 to 90,000 maize cobs. This will significantly boost production per hectare of land provided all the necessary things are done to complement the population. Now, let's talk about your farm workers. Farm workers, another option is hiring workers with their equipment. They will weed the soil and till it so it can be loose enough to preserve the topsoil and seed beds. In addition, farm workers charge as low as 4,000 naira to weed 1 hectare of farmlands. The manual labor on the farm includes harvesting, weeding, planting, spraying. Alternatively, you can hire government tractors. The price is very low for plowing per hectare for other operations. For 7 hours, 1 worker can easily gather and deploy bags approximately 2,500 cobs per hectare of farmland. With these, you can yield 2,000 to 4,000 kilos of maize. Now, after farm workers, planting an alternative crop. You may need to consider planting alternative crop in alternating years, such as soybeans, planting an alternating crop such as to diversify the chemical demands of your soil. This results in high yield crop production and continued production year in, year out, making you realize profits from both crops. You will never realize the profitability of maize farming in Nigeria until you try it. Maize matures very fast. It takes about 2 months to harvest. It takes a relatively short time to realize return of investment made on the crop farming. If properly done, it can make from 50% and above returns on investment. The target yield for a hectare is 3 tons. Averagely, 1 ton of maize crop sells for 60,000 naira. Now multiply 60,000 naira times 3 is equal to 180. Your profit can be calculated at 180,000. An advantage of maize farming is that you can always sell it to the last grain. It can be purchased by farmers for cattle livestock feeding. You might also want to consider harvesting dry and green maize leaves for feeding and bedding of animals. Maize farming requires commitment, monitoring, and serious attention. Now that you have learned the possibility of setting up a maize farm with little capital, it is time to take it to the step to get equipped Best advice necessary. In Nigeria, maize is consumed by a large number of families and households in many different forms. Maize cultivation and farming is done in a small, medium, or big scale across the country. It is therefore an important source of income for many Nigerian farming households, despite the fact that it comes in a variety of colors, grain, shapes, and sizes. The popular cereal is mostly accessible for cultivation and consumption in some varieties. White and yellow maize. Yellow maize is mostly utilized for feed and human consumption, whereas the white maize is used for agriculture. Maize is mostly utilized as animal feed, food grain, popcorn, baby corn, sweet corn, and green crops. Corn flour is also popular. It is also used as a raw ingredient in hundreds of industrial goods such as oil, starch, alcoholic drinks, food sweeteners, pharmaceuticals, gum, textile, packaging, food cereals, cosmetics, and paper. Now, let's still take you back to how to grow your maize properly. The plants are pretty simple to cultivate, and even if you are a beginner, you'll be able to grow them. You may readily protect the decrease in soil grade by growing maize. When compared to rice, maize farming can save 90% of the water and 70% of the potency, and maize production can be more profitable than rice or wheat growing. Now, first of all, select a good location. Maize plant grow on soil that has a pH range of 5.5 to 7.5. It may be grown in a range of soil types such as sandy loamy and clay loams. Heavy clay soils is not good for maize farming. However, the soil must be rich in organic matter and have a high water lodging capacity. Plants must be exposed to direct sunlight in order to produce more. To take all these elements in mind while selecting land for maize farming. Now, let's talk about climate prerequisites for farming maize. Maize plants are planted all over the world, and they may thrive in a broad range of environmental circumstances. It is a warm weather crop that does not grow well in locations where the minimum daily temperature is less than 90 degrees centigrade. The germination process is quicker and less variable, at some temperature ranging from 16 degrees to 18 degrees centigrade. In addition, the maximum temperature for maize grows is 30 degrees centigrade to 35 degrees centigrade. The seed can sprout at temperature as low as 10 degrees centigrade. Now, you should choose a can that is widely planted and available in your region. There are several kinds of maize to choose from. The 6 main kinds are sweet corn, like I said earlier, flour corn, popcorn, pod corn, flint corn, and dent corn. Now, let's talk about seed sowing. Seeds should be drilled at a consistent depth and into wet soil. For maize to grow, soil temperature should be 8 degrees centigrade first in the morning for 4 to 5 days. All maize should be drilled in the last 10 days of April, where climates will definitely vary by region. Now, let's talk about irrigation. Maize plants on average needs less water than other crops. Although proper and frequent watering will assist in the growth of healthy plants, the land must have an adequate drainage system to prevent excessive retention for a good maize growing enterprise. Water gently once a week for a month during the early stage of this crop. Furthermore, supplemental watering should be provided every 25 to 30 days. Now, let's talk about control of weeds, pests, and disease. Weed management is crucial to the success of a maize farming business. Initially, remove any weeds from the field when plowing and harrowing. After that, at least 2 additional hand weeding are required. The first weeding should take place 20 to 25 days after sowing, followed by a second to 40 to 45 days later. Mulching can aid in control of most weed in the region. Maize, like many commercial crop, is susceptible to pest and disease. Cornworm, stalk borer, or stem borer short bug pink bother termites and shoot fly are common maize plant pests. Now, harvesting. Harvesting begins when the outer covering of the cob turns from green to white. When the stalk have dried and moisture level of the grain is between 20 and 17%, it is optimal time to harvest maize. Maize may be harvested by hand and machines can be used to separate the seeds. It's still your first agricultural TV station in Nigeria talking about Agricultural Research Council of Nigerian Television, and the program has been Back to Farm. Today on Back to Farm, we're telling you how you can actually embark on a maize farm using a very minimal capital. And we've taken you through that. So now, after taking you through all of that, let us now take you to the history of how maize came to be. So stay tuned on this interesting episode of the program Back to Farm as we take you back. Long-time domestication has radically changed maize from its origins. The morphology of modern maize is strikingly different from that of its white Asian from Toisin. Unlike the toast-night, maize has hundreds of exposed canals attached to a cob that is completely covered by husk and cannot reproduce on its own. In the last century, maize yields and quality in most maize-producing countries have been greatly increased through conventional hybrid breeding programs. Due to the common application of hybrid seeds and advanced management technologies, maize production has reached a plateau in many countries. Thus, for sustainable maize production, there is an urgent need to shape maize traits and architecture to cope with the challenge of increasing population and changing climate, as well as the requirement of maize mechanization as in other major crops. Maize improvement will benefit from a better understanding of genetic controls of yields and stress endurance. Recent researches in Arabidopsis and crop plant integrated with genomics, proteomics, and metabolomics have accelerated the discovery of genes and molecular makers of important agronomic traits, which can potentially be used for genetic engineering and targeted breeding, respectively, of superior maize varieties. So it is an unprecedented opportunity to make a better maize ideal type for higher yields and increased stress endurance in a changing climate. Today, we will discuss the current challenge of maize production, particularly in Nigeria. We also highlight the need for improvement of maize tolerance to drought and heat waves and proposed traits and phenotype requirements for a maize ideal type. This information will assist in targeted maize improvement through molecular breeding approaches in the near future. Now, let's talk about enhancing maize tolerance to drought and heat waves. Drought and heat are two major environmental stressors and often occur concurrently. This severely limits planting productivity worldwide. The near future global climate change is likely to increase the risks of extreme temperature, particularly heat waves. Although maize originated in the tropics, it is highly sensitive to drought and heat, particularly at silk emergence or and when flowers are ready for pollination. In China, approximately 60% of the maize planting area is prone to drought and heat waves, which may result in a high as 30% yield loss in an affected year. Hence, enhancing maize tolerance to drought and heat is critical for sustainable maize production. Creating drought and heat-tolerant maize cultivars adapted to different geographical and environment has proven to be a difficult task for maize breeders. As early as 1970s, the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center began a breeding approach for drought-tolerant maize lines and spent more than 30 years developing several drought-tolerant varieties. Drought and heat-resistant maize varieties are still unavailable in other parts of the world. The responses to drought and or heat stress in plants are complex psychological and biochemical processes and involve changes in anatomic structures. These characteristics are determined by sets of genes with the maize genome. Thus, it is necessary to identify stress-related genes proteins. After stress-related genes, protein have been identified. Maize stress tolerance can easily enhance via genome editing technology. This process requires less time than a conventional breeding program. The availability of maize genomics sequencing and high throughput genomics, proteomics, and metabolics approaches have accelerated the identification of potential stress-related genes, proteins, metabolism in maize plants. A range of stress response-related proteins such as heat shock proteins, phytochrome regulators, signaling proteins, and protective enzymes contribute to the drought and heat stress tolerance in maize. Protein improves chloroplast performance under heat stress by interacting with specific chloroplast proteins in maize. The overexpression of trehalose phosphorate in maize has increased the concentration of trehalose and sucrose in ear sparkles and improve eventual maize yield, especially under severe drought condition. The predicted integral membrane protection encoded by agrosgen family and novel negative regulators of inclined signal transduction in transgenic maize plant overexpression of agros reduced plant sensitivity to ethylene, leading to enhanced drought tolerance and greater grain yield under both drought stress and well-watered condition. Recently, the Developed Drought Database, which is an expert-curated compilation of plant drought stress genes and their homologs in 9 model and crop plant species including maize, DroughtDB facilitates the identification, analysis, and characterization of genes involved in drought stress tolerance in agricultural important crop plants. Major genes proteins associated with drought and heat tolerance can be candidates for maize stress resilience improvement by transgenesis. Maize root architecture must be shaped with a changing climate in mind. In maize root, crucial arachima varies among genotype and can be induced by hypoxia conditions. Maize leaf architecture may also need to be shaped with a changing climate in mind. In maize leaf, a larger number of stomata and shorter distance between the vascular bundles and the leaf blades are beneficial characteristics for drought tolerance. Moreover, leaf coil, which helps conserve water for use in other function, is an anatomical characteristic and can potentially be used for enhanced plant tolerance to drought and heat. In maize, leaf coil is found to be controlled by few genes. Those maize lines with rapid leaf culling could be useful resources for tolerance improvement. In the near future, shaping roof leaf architecture will be the key target for improving maize in a changing climate. Globally, new lands for maize production is limited. Thus, it is essential to increase maize productivity per unit area to cope with the increased demand for grains. High-density planting is a practical approach for increasing maize yield per unit area. In China, in Nigeria, the average maize yield is approximately 6,000 kg HA, with a planting density of 52,500 plants, both of which are lower than those in the United States. If maize planting density in Nigeria increased by 15,000 plants, the total maize yields is predicted to increase by 20%. However, maize varieties that are suitable for high-density planting are still lacking in some developing countries due to specific climate and environment. Thus, breeding such varieties is an important task in maize improvement. Lastly, the level of mechanized maize production is relatively lower in developing countries than in the United States. In Nigeria, the Yellow River Valley is the primary maize production area and often encounters rainy weather during the maize harvest season. Approximately 1 to 3 of the maize in the area is still picked by hand. Manual harvesting is time-consuming and labor-intensive. Furthermore, Nigeria has undergone rapid urbanization in recent years, and there were more people living in urban areas than in rural areas. At the end of 2011, at that time, approximately 51% of the population live in urban areas compared to 26 in 1990. As a result, rural labor is extremely lacking. Therefore, the future development of maize production relies largely on the full implementation of agricultural mechanization in developing countries. To meet the demands of mechanized harvest, several maize shoots threads should be shaped via both genetic improvement and molecular maker selection. Breeding maize canals with a rapid filling speed, a rapid dehydration, and easy threshing characteristics are needed. Uniform and moderate plants are near height, as well as lodging resistance upon maturity will also be a beneficial characteristics for a maize production mechanization. In China, a few promising maize varieties for mechanized harvest have been developed and have been evaluated in field conditions prior to large-scale planting. Alright, on that note, we come to the end of the program Back to Farm, the program that comes to you and tells you what you need to do on how to go back to farm as we ought to, which happens to be Nigeria's first love in terms of creating revenue. And of course, today we took you and told you how you can actually start a maize farm using a very small capital. So if you're out there and if you're you, this is the program to actually watch and understand what and what you need to actually embark into farming, since it is the new boom. Until some other time, my name remains Joshua Ishaya, thanking you for being a part of the program. Have a splendid day ahead. Bye for now.